Hello everyone, so good to see you. Nintendo, much to our surprise, very recently announced and shadow dropped their latest release, Nintendo Music, now out on mobile platforms. This is significant as it's the first mobile release since Pikmin Bloom in 2021. Unlike other titles, you do need a Nintendo Switch online account to play. Kind of falls in line with the playtest that people recently signed up for, in which only a select few can participate. It has been a very interesting approach Nintendo has been taking lately. Luckily, Nintendo Music is not a limited release with a sign-up window of 5 seconds where only a whopping 10 people get to play. As long as you have an account with Nintendo, you too can join in worry-free. At this point in time, I feel like there are people who are a little wary of mobile releases with Nintendo, especially if you've indulged in that specific economy before. Titles like Mario Kart Tour are playable but have ended further updates. Then there are some like Dragalia Lost that have ceased and been removed entirely. Long live my Bondforge family. Even very recently we've seen this, being the upcoming Animal Crossing Pocket Camp Complete coming December 2nd. Mobile games don't last unless you're Fire Emblem Heroes and you're still making bank despite how broken every single unit is these days. But how will this differ, you ask? How will the gameplay of Nintendo Music hold up to the point that they are confident enough to release this in a market as volatile as today's? Well, that's the great thing, this title is completely free to play. And I can say with confidence that so far, it looks like there's no in-game payments. Everything within this title is something that you can access. And it's all available from the start, rather than starting from the very beginning with titles like Super Mario Bros., Metroid, and Metroid. You can go straight to listening to tracks from the Switch era, the N64 era, or if you're feeling frisky, the DS with two very unique choices. This application will take you to a plethora of worlds, all accessible with the touch of a finger. And I'm sure you know what the DS thinks of touching. While the Day 1 edition of content may arguably have less than stellar amount of playable features, Nintendo does promise to add free updates for a good long time in the foreseeable future. And, as of this recording, we already got said update with the addition of Super Mario Bros. Wonder, giving us hope that this app will be patched with updates in at least a semi-frequent manner. It's quite a shift considering the release schedule we got for other retro content ever since the Wii days. In the worst case scenario, we may have to wait to have the entire Mario collection of music on the application by approximately 2064. And of course, that's not to say that this beginner starter pack is anything to scoff at. This title already features potentially hundreds of hours of content given your playstyle, with some titles really pulling in the weight compared to others. But before we go into each individual title themselves, there are a few key features that we want to highlight, some that truly touch into some unique ideas that we haven't seen before. On the title screen, there is a warm welcome and greeting, the first of many news highlights to come. Once you start getting your hands on titles or custom lists, they'll be available on the Recently Played tab for ease of access if you want to pick up where you left off after suspending play. Once you select your player, you'll get access to each and every portion of content associated with said character, a remarkable accessibility option for those who don't have the time to look up the excessive wealth of titles someone like Cappy has been in throughout Nintendo's history. Further down, you can take a look at select titles that feature top tracks, the most played bits from what I assume to be the algorithm keeping track of what's chosen by players. Find the top tracks of Animal Crossing New Horizons, Splatoon 3, and all 10 songs from Super Mario Bros. One of the most appreciated features is the option to extend your playtime. Do you find these selections to be too simple and short, sometimes less than a minute or two? Well, Nintendo has mostly figured it out, and you'll be able to easily extend some songs to 15-30 minutes to a whopping hour long for those taking on those endurance runs. Nintendo has also thoughtfully compiled lists of songs that benefit the most from this extension feature. If you ever wanted to relive the feeling of spending more time making a Mii than actually playing Wii Sports, then this is the option for you. Too much content to play with too little time? You too can experience the very best with curated albums, the premier one being Nintendo Music Top Tracks. Delve into the world of Nintendo's finest and most memorable tracks, like Mario Kart 8's rendition of Animal Crossing, or Shadow Temple. This actually changes pretty often, and I kid you not, day 1, the most terrifying music of The Damned was at the very top of the list. Wow, what a great way to get reintroduced to my sleepless childhood nights. The next section is something to highlight for sure. You'll notice there's an entire list of artists specifically for Splatoon. Given how thematic music itself is to that world, it's no surprise that there's a section centric to it. This goes beyond just the idol groups of the Squid Sisters and Deep Cut, however. Many in-game bands are credited, from Seaside, Front Row, to DJ Octavio himself. Only one song from that guy, but he sure knows how to serve up a fresh hit. There are even more curated playlists depending on your gaming style and mood in the moments. There are some specifically set for stages of Super Mario Galaxy, the battle maps of Fire Emblem The Blazing Sword, snowy themed music of Animal Crossing New Horizons, and more. Are you feeling sleepy and ready for bed or going out for a run? There are set playlists for those scenarios too. This is a title that you can play while you run, eat, and sleep. Or, of course, you can search specifically by title, in which you can peruse the options at your leisure, setting tracks to queue up one after another, downloading said tracks, or adding to your favorites so you can make your own playlists with ease. Although there are customization options, there unfortunately is no online mode, and you cannot share your albums and custom lists with others easily. Perhaps that'll come in a future patch? We're just at the 1.1 or so, and there's a lot of room for improvement. Obviously, one of the biggest improvements would be to expand the library. There's plenty of room for those free updates, and given how this is a streaming service, a bold move for Nintendo to release an entire title like this set solely online, by the way, they can add to it as much as they like. I imagine it might take longer for content to roll out. One of the most time-consuming aspects must be capturing the screenshots for the titles. Nearly every single one of these tracks has a screenshot that is directly related to the scene or situation in which the song plays. That must have been a painstakingly long process for some titles over others. I think one of the only gripes that I really have with the gameplay is that sometimes it takes quite a while for the track to load. This is Nintendo with their usual track record, if you will, for less than optimal online stability, but if you can handle the lag, you're in for a very fun time. In all seriousness though, for as cute as it is to credit the characters in-game for the music that they make, like with Splatoon artists and KK in Animal Crossing, there is a strange omission here. The actual composers, the people whose hard work goes into making these soundtracks, they are not listed. Even Nintendo's most prestigious composers, of whom this application would obviously not even exist without, aren't even credited. When you go under track information, more than likely, all I do is repeat information that we already know, like the name of the song, the game it's from, and Nintendo's copyrights. On other platforms in which we can enjoy media like this, there are always credits listed on who made the music. For the record, I'm not trying to be the champion of anybody here or get mad for other people. Most of the composers in reality probably just don't care because that's just the way that things are in Japan. This isn't meant to be getting angry that Japanese culture doesn't function the way that I want it to. It's instead meant to be more about educating people who are just genuinely curious about who have composed music for some of these games while crediting their other work. With that in mind, if Nintendo won't do it yet, I'll do it myself. Let's look into every single soundtrack that's available right now, the quality of their music, and most importantly, the composers that have made the music of some of our favorite games. Naturally, we start with the sounds of the original Super Mario Bros. For the NES, or Famicom. The soundtrack, while short and partially filled with jingles, is composed by Koji Kondo. Is there much more we can say about the true legend of Nintendo soundtracks? Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, Star Fox, Pilot Wings, several Mario sports and spin-offs. Honestly, name a Mario or Zelda title and he has very likely at least been a sound supervisor, if not making the music himself. And although he worked on titles before, like the arcade versions of Punch-Out!, Golf, Stalker, and Devil World, it truly began right here. A short and sweet soundtrack, there isn't much that can be said about the legacy that hasn't already been said, right? It is simply one of the most timeless soundtracks made for any piece of media ever, and it deserves to be here as a lesson and centerpiece of sound design from the earliest days of video game composition. The soundtrack is also only about 10 minutes long, so give it a listen and culture yourself if you haven't already. Truly the definition of humble beginnings. The original Metroid on NES also shares some traits with Super Mario Bros. It was composed by Hirokazu Tanaka, sometimes known as Hip Tanaka, who has worked on a lot of classic titles back in the day. From the sound effects of the original Donkey Kong arcade titles to the NES Zapper titles, Balloon Fight, Wrecking Crew, Kid Icarus, Famicom Wars, Mother 1, Earthbound, the first two Fire Emblems, oh, it's extensive. He recently worked on more Pokemon spin-off titles like Pokepark, Pokemon Art Academy, and Detective Pikachu. But right here, there are tracks in Metroid that have endured the test of time and are widely regarded as some of the best melodies in the franchise. From Brinstar to the escape sequence, this collection of music captures that feeling of isolation in space in a way that no other title could compare to. Directly comparing itself to Metroid is Metroid, but this time for the Famicom Disk System. For some reason, Nintendo saw fit to release both versions. The difference here is the audio quality. These titles were released on a reusable disc and took advantage of a Wii channel for sound enhancement, giving the music a richer depth. If you can't really tell the difference, I suggest listening to both title screens and Samus appears one after another while wearing headphones. To be honest, most songs aren't too noticeably different. The real difference in audio quality comes from the sound effects. Your beam shots, jingles, and creature sounds are very noticeable. Ridley, for example, actually screeches like a monster on the disc system. But we're not talking about sound effects per se. It's very interesting to include a Famicom Disk System soundtrack with the original. It makes me wonder what other kind of unique soundtracks we'll get down the line. Exiting the NES era, we arrive at Kirby's Dream Land for the Game Boy. It is composed by Jun Ishikawa, who is responsible for several titles in the series, working on the entire Dreamland saga and composing with others all the way through Kirby and the Forgotten Land and Return to Dreamland Deluxe. They also worked with the Box Boy series. Ishikawa composed for Season 2 of Kirby Right Back At Ya and music that played exclusively in the Kirby Cafe. Kirby's first foray into Dreamland is a very short one. This title can easily be beaten in one sitting. I think that's basically the major goal here with this first batch of music. It's pretty much establishing many themes that have remained staples of their relative series over the many years. In this case, Green Greens, Float Islands, and Mount DDD are some themes that we still hear to this day. Ishikawa is, for the most part, responsible for the core musical identity of our Pink Puffball. The only other soundtrack on the Game Boy is, interestingly, Dr. Mario. Not the NES version? Also composed by Hip Tanaka, which is just a fun name to say, this title contains classics like Fever and Chill, themes that I honestly would probably never knew existed if it wasn't for Super Smash Bros. Melee. But why Game Boy? The themes were more fully realized on the NES. Maybe they wanted to balance out releases by platform? It's kind of a weird decision, but it's still nice to have. Though there's honestly not much more I can say about this, so we're moving on. Okay, but what about when we really started to tap into the capabilities of sound design? With the Super Nintendo came even more sound channels, and the possibilities multiplied. Yoshi's Island was composed by Koji Kondo, and features some of the most feel-good music that you could ever possibly expect from the Hungry Dino. You can really feel the sound being pushed to its fullest potential in tracks like the Underground BGM. And if you're ever having a bad day, the Athletic BGM is guaranteed to make you smile for how silly and danceable it is. Not a whole lot I can really say about it without spoiling the fun of you discovering it for yourself. Give it a listen if you're just chilling out sometime. You know we're in a good era of music when we're going from Yoshi's Island to Donkey Kong Country. Composer David Wise, working as a freelancer, thought he would only do a few tracks before being ultimately replaced by a Japanese composer. The 3 demo tracks that he worked on all ultimately merged into one theme, DK Island Swing, which you can definitely piece apart if you give it a good listen. Given just how perfectly it captured the mood and setting of the game, Wise was given the offer to compose DKC's final score, and that became one of the most definitive soundtracks of the generation. He was also assisted by Evelyn Novakovic, who continued to work with Rare until Viva Pinata. She worked on sound effects for the Banjo-Kazooie series, arranged the music for Donkey Kong Country titles on handheld, and was in fact the voice of Joanna Dark. She contributed 7 tracks to DKC, including the world map theme. This was Evelyn's first project on the Super Nintendo. Robin Beanland is the final credited composer, working on a lot of Rare titles for the N64 like Jet Force Gemini, GoldenEye 007, and Conker's Bad Fur Day. He continues to stick with Rare, composing for games like Sea of Thieves. He would create only one song here, Funky Kong's theme song called Funky's Fugue. Curiously, it was intended for an internal progress video of another Rare game, Killer Instinct, before Nintendo decided to use it for Donkey Kong Country's promotional trailer. If you give this whole song a listen, you can sort of hear how, despite being adopted to this title now, the overall mood of this track doesn't really fit the rest of the DKC theme like the other songs. In the end, that sort of fits a cool dude like Funky anyways. Every track in this title though, I'm sure many of you already know, it's just so imaginative and atmospheric. These games are really ones to utilize the expansion feature with. Definitely give those jungle beats a listen to. And thus we enter the N64 era, and of course we have The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time here. Composed by Koji Kondo, this is an extremely influential soundtrack of the era. Along with classics like The Lost Woods, Hyrule Field, and The Song of Storms, there's actually a lot of jingles in this soundtrack too. One of the greatest challenges of this game was Kondo creating distinct themes to the limited scale provided by the Ocarina's tunes. The end result is very natural and has led to some of the most memorable themes of the series. One interesting tidbit is the Fire Temple theme. Original cartridges had a unique chanting in the background, which was taken from a sample of those collections of sounds and effects you'd see used for creative media. It was taken out of later physical releases of the game because of Nintendo wishing to stay away from any religious references, and that's the version that we hear in this app. The official soundtrack for Ocarina of Time released in Japan in its entirety, a full 82 tracks. Overseas, however, we got less, and it wasn't even released in Europe or Australia at all. Thankfully, we can enjoy the full 82 soundtrack here, adapted for an English-speaking audience. Good old localization. The sole other N64 title on this list is Star Fox 64. Remember when it was exciting that Nintendo remade the story of the first game? The soundtrack is composed by Koji Kondo and also Hajime Wakai. He's worked on rather notable games like F-Zero X, the Pokemon Stadium games, The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker, A Link to the Past and Four Swords for the GBA, and the first two Pikmin titles, to name some. Star Fox 64 expanded upon what was established on the Super Nintendo and really brought out the mood of a space opera. From the dogfights with Star Wolf to the gentle but heroic themes of sages like Zonas, this brought about so many layers to the Star Fox franchise that we would hear in titles in the years to come. Sound design was really important to this title, being one of the first fully voiced video games ever, and on the N64. I feel as though some people take specific routes in this game every time that they play, and they don't give every song enough attention, so please, take a moment to listen to the themes that maybe you perhaps skip over when playing through. Sector X, for example, sounds like it could have come right from a Metroid game on the N64. Maybe that's just me closing my eyes and wishing really hard. I will also note one small thing that's always amused me. Since Koji Kondo worked on both Ocarina of Time and Star Fox 64, you might in fact hear some similarities between the both. One of the most recognizable being from some of the closing shots of both games in the credits, which have a very similar theme. Just a fun little fingerprint of Kondo on his work. To my amusement, the only title from the Game Boy Advance available so far is Fire Emblem The Blazing Blade, first known as just Fire Emblem when it released as the debut title in the West in 2003. The soundtrack was composed by Yuka Tsujiyoko, who has worked on every single Fire Emblem title leading up to this being the 7th entry, but this would be her final time working on the series as a composer. She was assisted by Saki Kasuga, who has continued to compose for Intelligent Systems for other Fire Emblem titles and the Paper Mario series, interestingly, mostly in sound effects. Since joining with Bandai Namco, her work in the sound effect design also went into titles like Kid Icarus Uprising and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Fire Emblem The Blazing Blade offers 100 tracks, including 2 bonus tracks. Number 99 and 100 are songs that you could only unlock in your game if you had the right hardware. You need to connect your Game Boy Advance to the GameCube using a link cable and boot up the bonus disc included with Mario Kart Double Dash. An early form of DLC, you can send several bonus items and weapons to your convoy, and also unlock 2 legacy tracks, remixed with the updated sound fonts. These tracks include The Legend of the Dragon God, which is Tiki's theme from Mystery of the Emblem, and Royal Palace of Silice from Genealogy of the Holy War. It's kind of crazy to think that this might be the first time people are even aware that the soundtrack count went to 100, and it's very surreal to hear this in an official Nintendo app like this. As mentioned earlier, nearly every track in this app has a screenshot relating to said song. There is a shot of track 99 and 100 missing, which I find pretty funny. And I also love how clever the team got with some of these snapshots too. There is one for Arena Tactics that features Carla and Bartra specifically. Means nothing to a lot of people probably, but to those who know their Fire Emblem, they just know. All in all, a very good soundtrack, and I'm not even being biased here. There is some slight audio crunch, but this is still the best a GBA game has ever sounded. Composer credits aside, it's nice to see how much thought they put into these, like with the albums for Battles, Battlefields, and People of Believe. Kinda weird that this is the only GBA title available so far though. Oh, now we're cooking with some modern video game soundtracks. Metroid Prime's music was composed by Kenji Yamamoto, who has quite a prolific history with Nintendo, working on nearly every single Metroid title released since Prime 1, except for Federation Force and Other M. Maybe that's why people don't like those as much. Yamamoto, who also oversees audio for other Nintendo titles, was assisted by Koichi Kiyoma, who often works with sound programming, engineering, and advising in titles like Super Mario Maker, The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, and most recently, a game you might know by the name of Super Mario Party Jamboree. Metroid Prime consists of a mix of old and new themes, with remixes of Lower Norfair and Magmore Caverns, and Ridley's theme from Super Metroid. A little bit of history here. Tommy Tallarico Studios initially provided sound effects for Metroid Prime, but Miyamoto told them that they were not good enough for the extended presentation that they had planned for Space World 2001. Get wrecked, Tallarico. Despite being very much a game about exploring desolate landscapes and fighting against alien life forms, there's a lot of memorable music in the first Metroid Prime. The atmosphere, especially for the Talon Overworld and Phendrana tracks, are exquisite, and I highly recommend that you give the album a listen to when you're just vibing out or need something immersive to work to. Phendrana Drifts and Phendrana Battle, I guess it's called now, are some of my favorites, absolute favorites of the GameCube era of video game music, and some of the best tracks to put on extension. So we're gonna get into an album that I must admit I don't have a lot of experience with, but that's good. I love the opportunity to get familiar with something that I have no prior experience with. It's kind of like playing as a character in Smash Bros. Where I've never played their series before. Tomodachi Collection was only released in Japan for the Nintendo DS and features music from Daisuke Shiba. He worked on titles like Jam with the Band, Style Savvy Trendsetters, and the Swap Note ad on 3DS. They were assisted by Asuka Ito, who has worked on titles like Pilot Wings Resorts, arrangement for Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, and Tomodachi Life. She also not only provided music for the Rhythm Heaven series, but also voice samples as well. If you've ever played Tomodachi Life, you have a pretty clear idea of what kind of music you're in for here. The majority of the songs that I had listened to are very much, and I say this in a positive way, the exact definition of no thoughts, head empty music. It's great! I was listening to the music that you usually set your Miis to sing to with those hilarious automated voices, and yup, they're all sung in Japanese with that iconic distortion. I was losing my mind. There's so much charming music here. It's just a joyful and silly soundtrack to get you back into a good mood after a long day. Joining Tomodachi Collection as one of the least predictable soundtracks to get on an app like this, Nintendogs for the DS. This is one of the other titles that Hajime Wakai has worked on, and I'm a little sad to say that I didn't really play much of Nintendogs back in the day, but I do know how important it was to people. The soundtrack does consist partially of sound effects and jingles. I am very familiar with the bathing music though, that's one of my favorite remixes in Smash Bros. Maybe it's just the sound font, but it reminds me a lot of the album right before Tomodachi Collection. Oh, and hey, if you feel like there's not enough classic Mario Kart music in the collection, you do get some classic themes here, like Mario Circuit, and out of nowhere, Daisy Cruiser music. Do you want to listen to the sound of water and waves as it's slowly being accompanied by thoughtful piano ebbing in and out for an hour long? We got you. Do you wish you can listen to Richard Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries in the lowest audio quality possible? Nintendo has got you covered. I just don't know what this company is sometimes. Sit with this soundtrack for a while, give it a pet, and then be on with your day. Like all good things, these soundtracks are ideal in moderation. Super Mario Galaxy for the Wii. If we were going to represent music on the Wii with one game, this might be it. The musical history for this title is extensive, but I'll try to keep to the main points. The main composer of this game is Mahito Yokota, who has worked on several projects from Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword to the Pikmin short animations with Hajime Wakai, and was the supervisor for the Super Mario Bros. Movie. He initially had concerns about using orchestral rhythm in a Mario game and whether or not it would fit, but knew that it would still make the adventure more epic. Yokota originally planned for Mario Galaxy to have a Latin American style of music, and went so far as to compose 28 tracks in that style. It was actually greenlighted by Yoshiaki Koizumi, the game's director and designer, but Koji Kondo said that it was no good and insisting that Mario was a cool character, not a cute one. Yokota, under the impression that Mario, a character for kids, needed a cuter soundtrack. Guided by Miyamoto after presenting 3 different styles of music, they went for orchestration because of how much more of a space-like mood they could create with it. Koji Kondo actually only composed 5 pieces for the game, whereas Yokota, who nearly resigned after the initial rejection, composed the rest at Kondo's suggestion. 28 orchestral songs were composed by a 50-person symphony. They would go on to make one of the most influential soundtracks in Nintendo's history, and push for more games that have fully orchestrated soundtracks in the future. From the grand opening of songs like Good Day Galaxy, the tense atmosphere of Battle Rock Galaxy, to the multiple renditions of Rosalina's Observatory, there is just so many good themes here. There's also a good mix of some traditional MIDI-composed soundtracks as well, but the whole soundtrack wraps into a very well-organized package of themes that suit an epic adventure in space. Okay, the Wii Channels. The Wii Channels, do you remember those? Making a Me, the Wii Shop channel, we're probably familiar with those at least. But have you ever listened to the soundtracks of the Photo channel, the Forecast and the News channels? Everybody Votes channel? This is amazing. This might be one of my favorite inclusions for how weirdly niche it is. You ever just want to play the Wii menu music bopping back and forth between your headphones for an hour? Incredible. So it was kind of weird to look back and find who composed things like the Photo channel, you know? It's not really a game, nor was it released on a disc or anything, right? But as far as I know, as much as I could dig up, the Wii channel themes and tracks were composed by none other than Kazumi Totaka. Very well known for working on the Yoshi titles, Luigi's Mansion, Link's Awakening, and leaving his mark on the entire Animal Crossing series. He may very well have in fact helped establish the genre of music that is No Thoughts Head Empty. The Me channel pretty much encompasses this entirely, but seriously, he's done some unforgettable work. Wii Shop Wednesday would not exist without this man's contribution to the ridiculously catchy theme. And why in the world do the Photo channel themes go so hard? This is the era where Nintendo cared so much about the quality of music in places that they just didn't need to put it into, from their UI, their menus, just things that would normally be so mundane but given so much character by engaging music. The song playing right now, you cannot tell me that it's from an app on a Nintendo console that lets you look at your pictures on the Wii. Look up slideshow Scenic. Boy, I could vibe out all day to that smooth jam. It made my graduation slideshow so much more interesting than it actually was. It is almost criminal how long I could talk about Wii menu channel and UI music. Not gonna lie, the Forecast channel music made me so nostalgic I almost wanted to cry. The way it changed from day to night themes, memories of spinning the globe around with my parents who were uniquely interested in what I was doing. The News channel, it was so hip and cool. I also loved to see the piles of newspaper that would show how dense news was from one region to the other. I'm a person that really loves chill, synthy, electronic music, and this collection hits so much of that, man. The Everybody Votes channel? Oh dude, I have core memories of that theme that plays when you suggest a question. Just sitting in the room with my thoughts as I chilled out and pondered life. It's the perfect thinking music. How did they do that? The rest of the channel is pretty jamming too. Finally is the Check Me Out channel. Wow, I nearly forgot about this. I remember it had a Me Plaza remix and not too much else. It's not as memorable for me, but this channel's music fits in pretty much with the rest of the collection. So many good memories with these. I think I rambled on more about Wii menu music than any other soundtrack thus far. Wow. I think that brings us to the modern era. Yes, with the release of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, we now have entered the Switch years. And yeah, I know what some of you are thinking. Breath of the Wild has a soundtrack? Yeah, over 200 tracks. I don't think some people grasp the music of this title the way that the composers had originally intended. There are a lot of themes and short themes that play in specific moments. Some might be one time, sure, but the themes that are here are very intentionally made with the environments in mind, and Breath of the Wild is nearly all environments. Composers are Hajime Wakai, who we have addressed before and had worked on Zelda in the past. Manaka Takaoka had previously worked on Spirit Tracks and had focused mostly on the open-air field music, like The Great Plateau for example, composed in the minimalist ambient style. This posed a challenge for the entire sound team, but they were able to pull through and make those quiet moments arguably more memorable. Finally, Yasuaki Iwata was known for the more traditional themes and worked on many songs that you would hear in Towns, The Divine Beast, the Champions themes, and Kaz's music. There is always so much to be said about Breath of the Wild's soundtrack. It's not traditional, not at all. People spoke up about it and said that this doesn't really sound like their Zelda because there's not much sound at all. I firmly believe as an artist that when you're really trying to make an impact that goes against the grain, it's true that sometimes less is more. When considering the setting, this world has already lost. It's a broken Hyrule that doesn't have much left. Most of the explorable areas have no life in it, it's just nature trying to take back what it once had claimed as its own. Only in towns do we hear those more lively tunes, since they're more lived in with people to talk to. But out in the open, it's just Link. Somebody who already doesn't talk a lot. He's that little bit of life, those fluttering notes on the piano that come in every so often, that mindfully captures this Hyrule so well. When Link is riding on a horse for a little while, the piano will sound like it's galloping with you. It's incredibly masterfully done. For being so muted, the soundtrack itself speaks volumes because it's exactly the kind of world it's suited for. There will always be people that argue that the series' music lost its way with this game or that they just don't like it. And that's fine, but I think it's one of the most thoughtfully composed soundtracks in Nintendo's history of music, and I hope more people come to that realization with this album. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. You want to hear a scary story? We have been playing the same game for over 10 years now. And with this one, we even got the full Booster Course Pass tracks with it too. What a deal! This soundtrack has a big list of contributors, one being Yasuaki Iwata once again. We also have Shiho Fuji, who had worked on many games like Wii Fit, the Splatoon series, the new Super Mario Bros. Titles, and Super Mario Odyssey. Atsuko Asahi first worked on Steel Diver and also composed for titles like Super Mario Maker 2, ARMS, and Pikmin 3. They are also the voice of the little winged Pikmin. Ryo Nagamatsu worked on games like Super Mario Galaxy 2, Zelda: A Link Between Worlds, and Nintendo Land. Finally, we have Kenta Nagata, whose first game goes all the way back to Mario Kart 64. Aside from working on most of the Mario Kart series, they also contributed to Zelda: The Wind Waker, New Super Mario Bros. 2, and interestingly, Link's Crossbow Training, quite the game to have in the resume. As you can tell, this is a larger staff of composers that we're used to seeing, at least in this app so far. And it makes sense, this soundtrack is also composed with a big band that has become more common with Mario over time. There are 149 tracks here, with over 100 just being from racetracks alone. It's also funny that this game included a music player with the final wave of DLC. This OST is a tricky one, because we don't technically have every version of each theme. When you're front running, there's a percussion that's added on, for example. On the final lap, the theme goes faster, and in some cases it turns into a completely different melody, like with Big Blue. That saxophone goes insane. But now people won't know that because it's not on this app. That would have multiplied the OST like 3 times over, but they could have just had like one loop without front running and then the other with it. They apply this to tracks that have multiple versions, like the online selection screen. It just leads from one stage of the song to the next, so why not do that with the actual racing music? If they can make any track extend to an hour, they definitely have the ability to at least do that much. But this is still a fantastic soundtrack with an overwhelming amount of great content. And as mentioned, it's really cool to have the entire Booster Course Pass list here too. Now you can coconut mall your friends whenever you want. Super Mario Odyssey capitalizes on the new era of Mario games by trying some new things. At this point, we're now seeing a lot of familiar names now, like with the contributions of Shiho Fuji and of course, series sound director Koji Kondo. The lead composer this time, however, is Naoto Kubo, who surprisingly has one of the smallest resumes of music done in this entire list. He worked on Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, the second credits theme for Zelda Majora's Mask 3D, Super Mario Maker, and Odyssey. That didn't stop this game from having some of the catchiest music in this generation though. One of the big leaps this series took, of course, is including vocal tracks, the premiere being Jump Up Superstar. While constructing Pauline's character and role in this game, they not only made her the mayor of New Donk City, but also have an interest in jazz music, which eventually inspired the swing theme. The vocals are done by Kate Higgins. You might recognize her as the previous voice of Tails from Sonic the Hedgehog, Lissa from Fire Emblem Awakening, and more recently, Purah from The Legend of Zelda. She also provided the vocal tracks for Break Free Lead the Way, which plays during the ending sequence, and is still the voice of Pauline today. This album also includes the Japanese versions of both tracks. I feel like I've been very loose with the word, but really, this is an iconic soundtrack. Does it top the first or second Mario Galaxy though? That's really up to who you ask and what their preferences are. It is a bigger soundtrack, and there's plenty of variations of songs here, from the overworld themes to their 8-bit counterparts. To those who made such a memorable soundtrack, our hats off to you. Kirby Star Allies. I really wonder why this was chosen over, for example, The Forgotten Land, but maybe it's because this soundtrack leans into more of the classic themes of older titles. There are quite a lot of legacy themes included in this, songs ripped directly from across the Kirby series. That really is my best guess as to why. As one who has worked with many Kirby titles, Jun Ishikawa's inclusion as a composer shouldn't be a surprise. They are accompanied by Hirokazu Ando, who has worked almost exclusively on Kirby titles. They have paired up and worked with the majority of Kirby titles together, truly the star allies of the series. Ando also, for your information, was solely responsible for the entire soundtrack of Super Smash Bros. For the N64. Rounding out the sound production crew is Yuta Ogasawara. This is his first title, and he worked on composition and sound effects. He's contributed to Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Dream Buffet, Return to Dreamland Deluxe, and Box Boy plus Box Girl. As some may remember, Star Allies got a steady flow of updates, which included more allies from across the Kirby series, as well as more tracks. Of course, this OST makes sure to have all the updated tracks included. No matter how lukewarm you may feel about the game itself, the soundtrack delivers in ways that only Kirby can, mixing its cute and charming melodies with some shockingly almost out-of-place tracks. Seriously, go and listen to Sweet, the Star-Conquering Traveler closing movement The Twinkling Star. Yeah, that's a song title. It's the black and white one near the bottom of the list. Song hits harder after you consider how insane the Kirby lore got after this title in particular. But that's why we love Kirby, he can just do anything. And after further reflection, honestly, kind of a good Kirby music starter pack for anyone that's just getting into it. And I know this isn't related to the app itself, but I discovered something that blew my mind here. So if you go to any recent Kirby game, it likely has a sound test. Listen to any song, anyone that you want. Colored notes will pop out while the song is playing. If the notes are yellow, the song was composed by Yuta Ogasawara. If they're blue, the song was composed by Hirokazu Ando. And if red or magenta, it was by Jun Ishikawa. What a silly thing to do, but hey, in some ways they are acknowledging the composer beyond just seeing their names in the credits. And I think that's just super. Animal Crossing New Horizons. Don't let those head empty smiles fool you, this one is serious. Not 100 tracks, not 200, but just over 400 tracks in this game. They weren't kidding around. And neither will I when giving these credits. The main composer, of course, is Kazumi Totaka, who has made such an impact that he is still immortalized as KK Slider, known as Torakeke in the Japanese version. Joining him is Yasuaki Iwata, who we mentioned working on Breath of the Wild and Mario Kart 8. Yumi Takahashi, who has worked on Style Savvy Fashion Forward, Rhythm Heaven Megamix, Miitopia, Splatoon 3, and even on Nintendo Labo? Wow. We have Shinobu Nagata, who has worked on games like Super Mario Sunshine, Brain Age, Mario Kart DS and Double Dash, and the original Animal Crossing. Sayako Doi, her first game being Super Mario Maker 2, but also worked on Metroid Dread, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and Nintendo Switch Sports. Finally, Masato Osashi, whose first work is New Horizons, and also worked on Tears of the Kingdom, the Splatoon 3 expansion pass, and a game you might be familiar with known as The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. It's quite a team to put to work on one soundtrack. And this truly makes you recognize just how much work goes into music composition, right? This is a game that functions on the real time of our calendar. It has music that will only play on very specific days or events, sometimes music that plays just once a year. There's music for every single hour of the day, variations for when the weather is normal, for when it's raining, and also for when it's snowing. There's the facilities, sure, but then you think about it more deeply. Music that is only played once in the beginning of the game, when visiting people, there's cabin sea shanties, events like the wedding season, fireworks, holidays like Halloween and Christmas, the bug and fish catching tourneys, New Year's, the hour before New Year's, 30 minutes before New Year's, 10 minutes, 5 minutes before New Year's, and then the New Year's jingle followed by the New Year's theme at midnight, and then there's a New Year's theme at 2 a.m.? I didn't even know there was a 2 a.m. theme. And then New Year's Day has a theme for the entire day. This is almost too much to take into perspective. There's all these radio jingles that you probably never noticed either. Catching my breath, we get also, of course, all of the themes from KK himself. You can access both the live performances and the instrumental themes that you play when your music player has it. This is fantastic, as these are the full quality of the music player themes. The device that you play your music on in New Horizons will vary in quality depending on which device you set it on. A hi-fi stereo will sound better than a portable radio, for example. But now I can cruise on the road in all the best quality I could ever ask for. A lot of these themes are carried on from much older Animal Crossing titles, but it's still so nice to see that we're able to compile these into one album together. Whatever shortcomings you believe this title might have, you gotta respect the musical efforts put into every single entry. The next time somebody asks me who my favorite music artist is at a party, I'm gonna look them straight in the eye and say, KK Slider. Splatoon 3 is a really interesting one to look at. Within the universe of the game, there are musicians and artists that are credited for making these themes. From the Squid Sisters and Off the Hook to other bands and groups, this world is steeped in musical culture, and that's awesome. But it's kinda silly in some perspectives that the in-game characters get more credits than the actual composers. We got a lot of familiar names here at this point. Shiho Fuji, Ryo Nagamatsu, Yumi Takahashi, Sayako Doi. These are all names that we've already covered today already. As you might notice, Nintendo has put a lot of trust in their younger talent in these recent titles, including the music. But joining them as a veteran is Toru Minageshi, whose earliest contributions to Nintendo may be a certain jingle that you're aware of. They've worked mainly on first-party Mario and Zelda titles like the Wind Waker, Super Mario 3D World, and the rest of the Splatoon series. The final credited composer, Toshiyuki Sudo, is rather the opposite in terms of what kind of games he's worked on. These include smaller and more niche titles on handhelds, starting with Daigasso Band Brothers to games like Jam with the Band, various DS cooking training titles, to 3DS Street Pass games like Flower Town and Ultimate Angler. They have all come together to make very different and unique themes to emulate the idea that each band has their own style, voice, and technique. It's very clever. Thankfully, the app has done us the favor of dividing many of the group's music by artists, which is, again, odd that they can't just do that with the real composers. While much of the music in this application is using specific screenshots, this OOT in particular will show the art and logo of the in-universe band who sung or performed. I love the punny names of these groups like Seaside and Front Row. There's even a little bit of history for them in the playlist descriptions. By far, my favorite is the group that does the music for Salmon Run. I never really grasped the idea that the instruments represented by the band members are a DJ, a timpani, and a cello. It's a band of 3 salmonids and they are called Omega 3. I love these guys. I wish all the best in their careers. You get a little bit of each of the idol groups here too, of course, although it's worth noting that there is nothing from Side Order, the DLC campaign that released earlier this year. I can only assume that that's because the official soundtrack and art book will be releasing later this month on December 11th, known as Overtune. No point in selling that if people can just listen to it for free. This is why I believe that we probably won't be getting any recently released title soundtracks on here, as Nintendo might want to sell physical copies of the music themselves first. Side Order's music might come later down the line in this app, but yeah, Japan's always been a lot more involved with music CDs like this, at least more than we've ever been overseas. I wouldn't expect it, but hey, at least we have a great soundtrack here that's already filled with different styles and genres and a collection of weird and trippy sounding music that only Splatoon can make. Because it wouldn't be a proper starter pack of music without it, Pokemon also appears here, with every track from Scarlet and Violet. This soundtrack right here is handled by a variety of composers, and what a variety of composers we have here. It's no surprise that we have Junichi Masuda, the Pokemon director, producer, composer. The man's done it all within Game Freak. However, he only worked on very few soundtracks in Scarlet and Violet, like the Victory Road theme, and served mostly as a supervisor. Joining him, of course, is Go Ichinose, who's been working with the Pokemon series and composing music as far back as Gold and Silver. The only gen he hasn't contributed to, and was the main composer of, is Gen 6 with X and Y. He mostly handled themes related to the Path of Legends quest, and the very distinct battle track for fighting the Ruinous Quartet, I think labeled as the Calamity Pokemon within the soundtrack. Also on the team, Hiro Taniguchi, who has previously worked on Black 2, White 2, and Legends Arceus. They were even a sound director for Tetris 99. They mostly worked on themes relating to Team Star in this game. Continuing the list, Minako Adachi, whose first contributions to Pokemon was Black and White, and is credited to be working with Pokemon in the mainline series ever since. Her most notable musical credits before Pokemon was, in fact, The Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Ages, and Oracle of Seasons. Hitomi Sato has worked pretty much exclusively with Game Freak ever since Pokemon Crystal, contributing to most mainline titles since then. The only game that isn't Pokemon related on the resume here is Little Town Hero, which, funny enough, I haven't mentioned it at all, but most of this exact team worked on that title, much to Steve's dismay. Another composer that I can't find too much info on is Hiromitsu Maeba, other than the fact that they worked primarily with Capcom. He appears to have worked on titles like Legends Arceus, Devil May Cry 5, and The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Now, someone you may be familiar with is Toby Fox. The myth, the legend, the dog? He previously contributed a single song to Pokemon Sword and Shield, the Battle Tower theme. There's a whole story to get into with this theme and how it relates to a Halloween hack called Homestuck that we just don't have time to get into that right now, so we're moving on. Obviously, Toby Fox is the creator of Undertale, Deltarune. He did compositions for Omori, and also was part of the team that composed for Little Town Hero. Sorry again, Steve. He even remixed Megalovania for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. The guy is winning. He composed some of the most unique soundtracks in the game, like the Terra Raid battle theme, Area Zero, and the final battle in Area Zero. Like, man, he really contributed to how distinct the final area of those games are with Area Zero's music. It's like playing a different game. Like, what in the Made in Abyss is happening here? There is a final credit, but it doesn't really count because their track is no longer available in the OST collection. That would be Ed Sheeran, who did the song Celestial that plays in the end credits. He previously collaborated with them for Pokemon Go back in 2021, and I guess they just thought to bring him back for this. Because of copyrights, I imagine, we unfortunately do not have a perfect round 200 tracks in this OST because of its omission. And I gotta say, when looking some of this information up, I was losing my mind on the music page for Scarlet and Violet, which has Junichi Matsuda, Ed Sheeran, and Toby Fox just covered in foam in a bathtub. Just the collab of all time that ever collabed. And just before moving on, since I haven't actually said a lot about the music itself, this is totally a fine choice. It's not a classic or retro soundtrack, but it's very well done. I feel like Sword and Shield had a stronger soundtrack in some regards, but the highs hit really high in Scarlet and Violet. The DLC tracks are here too! Aw man, listening to Unova remixes in the Indigo disc, that made me really happy. Truly one of the best generations out there. And what better way to start the home stretch with this list than with Pikmin 4. That title theme is just so whimsical and innocent and happy, and it really tries to make me forget all the trauma I had playing Pikmin 2. This game is composed by a team of 3, Kenta Nagata, who we discussed a bit having worked on Mario Kart 8, along with Asuka Hayazaki, whose first work is The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords Adventures? I'm a big fan. She also contributed to some games like the original New Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks, Ring Fit Adventures, and unsurprisingly, Pikmin 3. Finally, we have Soshi Abe, who first worked on Breath of the Wild, exclusively for the expansion pass, very new to the composer family. He also worked on Dr. Kawashima's Brain Training for Switch, Metroid Dread, and Pikmin 3 Deluxe. There's a lot to appreciate about this soundtrack, from the chill ambience of nature to the way each Pikmin has slightly different instrumentation when you meet them for the first time. One of the core memories I have with Pikmin is exploring the underground for the first time in Pikmin 2. There was such a haunting ambience and hostility down there, with little moments of rest in between. I remember how soft and subtle the music got on rest floors where you could just see plants growing and butterflies fluttering around. And I think the return of these underground sections was a smart thing to do. They really do invoke that unique sense of dread, yet curiosity of wanting to go deeper. You have your upbeat themes, your battles, the very unsettling music that plays when the water wraith appears and I want to go hide up a tree, and of course, the groovy long legs battle. Why was this like the only boss you ever fought one variation of? We need this DJ on deck more often. What a weird game. Oh, and please give the themes for Olimer's Shipwreck Tale a listen to. Many of those themes ingrain bits and pieces of the original Pikmin soundtrack into their new melodies, like the Distant Spring and Serene Shores. It's such a wild, nostalgic mix of old and new, and honestly, kinda better field music than the base main game. Overall, a delightful soundtrack. And you know, that would have been it, but Nintendo was just crazy enough to upload a new soundtrack just one day after the app released. Super Mario Bros. Wonder, Day 1, or I guess Day 2 DLC? Many contributors to this soundtrack have already been mentioned at this point, being Koji Kondo, Jiho Fuji, and Sayako Doi. The final composer of our long journey here is quite interesting. Chisaki Shimuzu is the last credited composer, and I cannot find anything on this person. This might in fact be their very first title to work on and compose for. This is the most recent title on Nintendo Music thus far, being only about a year old, so it's not too surprising that we finally came across someone who was just starting out their composition career. And it's a good thing to stop and realize, you know? As much as we want them to, the composers of old classic titles just can't make music forever. The younger generation is getting trained as we speak. And seeing what's been coming out of the Switch era, I think the musical quality of Nintendo's most beloved properties are in good hands. You know, I've noticed that there are a lot of people just kinda hand-waving a lot of the more recent soundtracks for these franchises. Breath of the Wild, Echoes of Wisdom, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, Animal Crossing New Horizons, like, yeah, maybe the older games have more memorable music, but don't sleep on the music that we can listen to now. It's a shift, but one that I think we can all get used to soon. I mean, they're already doing a fantastic job. Thanks to them, I can now finally listen to the Piranha Plants on Parade in the highest quality possible. What? They already added another one? What do you mean? They literally updated this app again while I was recording this. Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Kong Quest. That's right, not Diddy Kong's Quest, Diddy's Kong Quest. It still gets very high praise and is widely regarded as one of the best 2D platformers ever made. This time, David Wise took full reins over the soundtrack, largely building upon what he composed for the first title, already discussed in this video. It retains prominent percussion in genres ranging from big band, disco, and hip-hop. Though many themes are comical in nature, we do get our fair share of chill, almost emotional themes. The big one, of course, is Sticker Brush Symphony Bramble Blast. I can finally stop going to that 15-minute Japanese upload of this song, because I can just do it myself. I'm free! David Wise is known to cite games by Koji Kondo like Mario and Zelda, to synthesizer-based filmed soundtracks released in the 1980s as influences. And monkey sounds. A lot of rhythmic monkey sounds. As far as musical entries go, the Kong is strong. Oh man, that was a lot of people and music to get through, and this app is going to keep on growing. And here I was trying to hurry after Super Mario Wonder, or Brothers Wonder. Geez, I can't stop calling it Super Mario Wonder. They didn't call it Super Mario Brothers World back in the day. Just make it easy. Most of the playable characters now aren't even brothers. Anyways, there is clearly hope for consistent updates, at least more than what we've been conditioned to be used to by way of corporate attempts of scarcity and exclusivity. All in all, great application that gives off great vibes, 8 out of 10 title. Hours upon hours of quality music with fun playlists and features. Small track list, relatively speaking, given the decades of history, but that can be fixed in time. I'm satisfied and have already been using it quite extensively because sometimes you can't truly and fully appreciate a melody until it's isolated from its context and can be seen and listened to from every angle. Yeah, thanks for watching everyone. I really wanted to express how much I'm into video game music and I never really had a proper opportunity to do so. I'm glad I could provide a little more assistance in giving the credits of these amazing soundtracks out there as well. I know it's not really within Japanese culture or practice to credit artists and creators in this way, but as an artist myself, sorry, I just feel like it's just a little too questionable these days. It doesn't take much to just stick a name on soundtrack information, right? Next to the title of the game, something? I guess we'll see if anything changes. I hope somebody out there enjoyed this. I knew I threw a whole bunch of sarcasm and information at you. So let me know in the comments what you've been listening to, if there's any songs in particular you think we should all listen to, and what games do you hope get added soon? I'm hoping that we're gonna get the Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door soundtracks. Yeah, both. The remake has so many more variations and tracks. I'm curious to see how they'll handle games that have remade versions. Nintendo's giving us a lot to look forward to. Alright everyone, take care of yourselves. Till we meet again.